Welcome everyone to our webinar, What is the best time of the year to go diving in the Galapagos Islands? The first few minutes we will take time to set everything up technically. I will introduce the faces that you see just below me, and we look if we can get Instagram live as well. So I think Instagram should be live right now as well.
We're live on Twitter. Let me check Instagram. Yep, live on Instagram. Let me check Facebook. Yes, and YouTube's the last one. Let me check.
Perfect.
Okay, yes, we are live on all four.
Well, that was not to expect, actually. So the faces that you see below I would like to start with Kate, who you already heard. She will support us right now in the webinar with everything technical, with questions. She will monitor your questions. So if you would like to see or write a question already during the webinar, feel free to do so. We will answer all the questions afterwards, but Kate will do the managing of it. When she's not in the webinar helping me with that, she is helping me with all the social media of the Galapagos shark diving. If you have been already in contact with us, you probably will have contact already with Kate as well. Then we have Jonathan Green. Jonathan Green is one of our shark scientists. He's the leader of the Galapagos Whale Shark Project, so the research project in the Galapagos Islands, where we talk a little bit more about on Sunday. And he will be there as he is a guide that comes over 30 years and works already since over 30 years in the Galapagos Islands and is here for your questions afterwards. And then we have Jean. Jean is a guest that is traveling with us several times already and several times to the Galapagos. So before we start, obviously, the seminar, I have to warn you that Galapagos is a beautiful place that might bug you to come back, as it did with Jean, because he came already several times back to the Galapagos Islands. So with further ado, make sure that you see your screen, that you can hear as well, but also where you can post your comments, where you can ask a question. So if you don't see it, so on YouTube it should be on your right hand side, in Instagram it should be below, in Facebook I think it's also below, and Twitter as well. If you do not see it or don't know how to ask questions, you might want to change to a different channel to make sure that you can ask questions after the talk, because it is obviously a talk where we give you information, but it's even more a platform for you to ask your question. And that's the reason actually why we're doing that. So look, if you know how you ask the question, I see the first ones coming in already. That's perfect. You can also try, just let us know where you're looking from, where you're sitting right now, from which country, and just try it if your chat function works. And with that, I will go over to our presentation.
We had one comment that there's a tiny bit, hi Shannon, thank you so much for joining, a little bit of feedback. So I'm wondering, Jonathan and Jean, maybe we could all go on mute and maybe that would help cut down on the feedback. I'm not exactly sure, but maybe.
Yeah. So maybe then let's do that. And I would just, either you mute yourself. Yeah, I think now everyone is muted. Very good. Okay, then let's share the screen. Let's go full screen, and I hope everything works well. If there are any comments, you hear anything, or so that it doesn't work very well, just do it as Shannon put it in the comments, and then Kate will tell me during our presentation. So, what is the best time to dive in the Galapagos Islands? First of all, obviously, Galapagos is one of the paradises that divers can go. It offers a unique opportunity to explore a variety of marine wildlife and pristine waters like nowhere else. It is a national park on land, but also a marine park and therefore protected underwater. And that you can see when you're coming diving to the Galapagos Islands in the right time. It's just an abundance of wildlife that you can find there. In this presentation, we will focus a little bit in detail what is the best time for diving and why it is the best time. And then afterwards, as I said, we will answer some questions that are maybe specific to you. Galapagos Islands, where are we located? So you see the world here, we have North America, Canada, and South America here, and there's a tiny island, Ecuador. And 1,000 kilometers, around 600 miles in the front of the coastline of Ecuador, we have the Galapagos Islands. We have different islands. As you see, it's 127 islands, islets and rocks, but we have 3 main islands with Isabela, Santa Cruz, and San Cristobal, where you also have inhabitants living there. But you see, the archipelago obviously exists with a lot of more islands. We have 2 seasons in the Galapagos Islands. We have one dry season and one wet season. The dry season is from June to November, more or less, and the wet season is from December to May. So the dry season, and we will explain a little bit further why is the best time to go to the Galapagos Islands if you're coming for diving. The wet season is a little bit warmer in terms of temperatures, and is a very, very good time to explore the islands on land and the flora and fauna. The dry season, as I said, is from June to October, November, is influenced from different currents. And the 3 main currents I would like to talk today about is the Humboldt Current, the Panama Current, and the Cromwell Current. The Humboldt and the Cromwell are both cold currents, and I will explain a little bit more, and the Panama Current is a warm current. Of course, in the Galapagos Islands, more different currents are coming together, but that are the 3 main currents I would like to focus on today. The Humboldt Current, you see it on the right-hand side, it's written here, coming from the south all the way from Antarctica, originates in Antarctica and comes up usually around May. However, that is the usual. So everything I'm talking today about is obviously what we consider as the usual seasons, but you often have influences like El Nino, La Nina, climate change, where you do have variations obviously coming in. But usually around May, you have the Humboldt Current pushing in from the south and bringing in a lot of nutrients. So the water that's originating there and coming up brings a lot of nutrient, and that means obviously a lot of food. And a lot of food means obviously a lot of fish. And when it arrives in the Galapagos Islands, it mixes with the warm waters, and it's basically a boost of wildlife that is just happening in May when the currents are coming in. The Panama Current is the warm current, as I mentioned already, pushing in from the north and hitting basically the upper islands, and then starting to mix with the colder currents coming in from the Humboldt from the south. And it brings in tropical fish, it brings in obviously warmer waters, what some of the animals obviously prefer, but the mixing obviously with the cold water then builds a great foundation to just thrive with the wildlife because it offers a lot of food. The Cromwell Current, as you can see, is coming in from the west. It is a deep current which then upwells on the Galapagos Islands. So it's bringing the nutrients that you have in deeper waters up to the surface, and obviously offers with that also a lot of nutrients on the surface higher up, what means that you have, again, a lot of food in the water, and a lot of food just means a lot of animals. Not only in the variety of different animal species that you can see, but also in terms of numbers. So just the sheer numbers of different animals that you can see is in this time just incredible. And to see it a little bit better, that is a screenshot of the sea surface temperatures that we just had 2 days ago. So that's a very current screenshot. So you see here Ecuador, 1,000 kilometers out, we have the Galapagos Islands, little islands here. And you see, when you look at the colors, to explain the colors a little bit better, obviously red is very hot, very warm. Yellowish is getting a little bit colder. And down where you have the blues, you see coming down from the south, from Antarctica, very blue, even purple, colder waters coming in. So you see very perfectly in this chart the equatorial front. You see the warm water pushing in. Usually at this time of the year, it doesn't push that far south, yeah. But yeah, very warm waters are right now here in Wolf and Darwin, what is basically the upper islands. So tomorrow we talk a little bit more about different dive places, but in Northern Islands, for example, should be around 26, 27 degrees, maybe even Celsius at the moment. Water is around 75 to 79 Fahrenheit. So you see, it's an area with nice and warm waters. Then you see the blues coming in from the south. That's the Humboldt Current hitting the islands here and creating obviously a little bit colder areas. So that is all different biogeographical areas where you have a foundation for different animals to thrive. So you obviously in the north find more species that prefer warmer waters, tropical fish, sharks, whale sharks, rays, etc. So that is basically a warmer area. Then you have the central islands that are hit by the Humboldt Current mixing with the warm and creating basically a habitat for sea lions, for turtles, and everything what's thriving there. And when you look very closely to the left-hand side of Isabella, so you have the Humboldt Current coming in, and then on the island you have the upwelling. Well, the cold water comes to the surface, and there obviously it's nearly light blue when you can see the color. And there you have animals thriving, like the sunfish that is over there. You have penguins. I mean, where in the world you can dive and have the chance to see penguins? You have the unique and famous marine iguana. You have so different animals because each different dive site is basically a completely different biogeographical area. And sometimes I like to say that you do 5 different dive holidays on 5 different dive locations, basically in one, because Galapagos is one of the unique places where you have such a variety of different animals because of these influences of the currents. So the best time, as I said, June to October. Why is it? Because of the currents, and you do see whale sharks. So that's the time where you see the big adult whale sharks up in the northern part. In Darwin, Wolf and Darwin are the places where you can see them, mainly in Darwin. And it's not the young juveniles, it is the big adults that are coming to the Galapagos Islands. And June to October is basically the best time where you can see them. Hammerhead schools, obviously that is the main reason why most of you want to come to the Galapagos Islands to see the big schools. And in this period of time, there tend to be much bigger groups. So not only the variety is increased, but also the sheer amount that you can see. And when you're lucky, you might have a school of 500 animals, just, going by, what is just incredible. And when you're very, very lucky, you might be even in the middle of a hammerhead school of really hundreds and hundreds of animals. The abundance, as I said, the sheer number as well as the variety of different animals, and if it's sea lions, sea turtles, dolphins, tropical fish, but also penguins. So you have so many different kinds of what no other location offers, that you can see such a variety on different animals. And all of that obviously makes a dive experience that often leaves you just with a wow, because each day it's just so different, because it's like you're having different dive holidays where you're going. That are a lot of words, but often pictures speak more than words. I mean, of course, the hammerheads that you see on the upper left, that is a school that you want to see or swim to. The whale sharks, and you can see in the picture on the top right how tiny little diver there in the background is, and it's just impressive when such a huge animal, I mean, it's bigger than a school bus, swims by you. It's a magical feeling that you have. The marine iguanas, it's just such a bizarre looking animal, and in the Galapagos, it's possible to see them feeding underwater. So it's the only marine iguana, or the only iguana that feeds underwater, that goes underwater. So it's just very, very unique to the Galapagos Islands. Obviously, the playful sea lions. And in Galapagos, depending on where you are, they are sometimes really, really playful and come up to you and play with you and are very curious. Giant manta rays. Often people don't know, but yes, in the Galapagos you have a couple of spaces where it's a very good chance to see giant manta rays. And I personally had my best manta encounter in the Galapagos Islands in a place called Roca Blanca. Just beautiful, these animals. Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, they have a wingspan of 7 meters or up to 7 meters. They're really beautiful giants as well. Penguins. I mean, where in the world you can dive with penguins, in a kind of temperate water where you're not freezing to death. It is cold on the western side of Isabella, as I said, through the Cromwell Current, but what a unique possibility. Dolphins. We sometimes have the luck that our safety stop is joined by a group of dolphins that are curious and coming up and looking at us, what obviously is always very unique. Different ray species, if it's eagle rays, if it's golden rays in big groups, it's just beautiful how they swimming by. Big schools of fish. If it's here on the upper left, there we have a big group of salemmas, or we often have big eye fish, big eye jacks up in the northern part of the islands. The funny looking red lip badfish on the corner right up in the upper corner right, with a really big Angelina Jolie red lips. Very funny to watch how they sometimes walk over the sand. They love cold water, so it's always a good chance to see them on the western side of Isabella. The sunfish, that's the biggest bonefish existing. So very, very bizarre. I still not explainable to me how they can swim with their fins up and down. It's just, they're very shy animals. However, we do have cleaning stations in the Galapagos where you can get from time to time a very close look on these beautiful animals. And that's of course only just a tiny amount, because if I would mention all the fish and all the things that you could see in the Galapagos, we probably would sit Sunday still here. But I think the picture on the right hand bottom just shows how vibrant Galapagos can be. If it's tropical fish, if it's big fish, if it's just the abundance is just a wow effect that you often have in the Galapagos Islands. Often we get the question, yeah, but I just can't travel in June to October or November. It's just not possible for me because of work or responsibilities. Should I not bother to go in December to May? No, you definitely should. So Galapagos is definitely a year-round possibility to dive. So if you're going back, you still have the badfish, you still have the sunfish, you have schools of tropical fish, you have the salemmas, etc. You still have manta rays, you still have dolphins, different ray species, you still have the chance to see penguins. You have the marine iguanas. Marine iguanas are all year round there, and sea lions, playful. And you do still have hammerheads. You don't see them in the huge groups, but you still see them. So it is compared with so many other dive spots in the world, just still such a wow effect. So if you're going in December or February or April, you still will go there and think, wow, what a beautiful place. Because often we're going diving in places where we see just little. So compare with that, the Galapagos is just a place that you can dive all the way around, and it never disappoints you. It's a beautiful place, and it has unique creatures like the marine iguana, like penguins that you can dive with, etc. So definitely, if you not can go in the main season, it is still such a beautiful place in the good season, and it brings some advantages if you're going in the off season, because the temperature are a little bit warmer. So for everyone who gets cold easily, like myself, the warm season, obviously, the waters are warmer. Sometimes with the decreased nutrients in the water, the visibility gets better. However, you often can have bad weeks in the warm season as well as you can have very good seasons or good visibility in the cold season. So, but that is usually a little bit improved visibility. And the waters are calmer because the trade winds are not as strong. So it has a little bit advantages to go in the off season as well. So if you're planning it, definitely you should go. To summarize all of my sayings right now, best time is June to October, because that is just when the Humboldt current, the Cromwell current, and Panama current are coming together and basically attracting whale sharks, the big schools of hammerheads, the variety of marine wildlife that you have in the Galapagos, where you have basically a creation of different biogeographical areas that are in themselves a different dive spot everywhere you're going. It is a unique place. As the Galapagos, you offer different things that you can see, and it is, due to the fact it is a marine park, a national park, very pristine in comparison to so many other places. So it is a protected area, and you can see that. You can feel the life that is just going on there. As I said, it's a year-round adventure, so you definitely can also go in the off-season. If you love the big stuff, then of course the colder season are the better choice, but it is a year-round adventure possible, and will give you definitely unforgettable memories when you're going and diving there, because that what you can see there, that you can feel underwater, is just so unique that definitely will make you want to come back. And you support conservation. So when you're going there, it is a national park, you of course support the conservation work. And if you're choosing companies like Galapagos Shark Diving, for example, we do give donations back to the Galapagos Whale Shark Project. So you're supporting science actively with donations, but you also support by citizen science, that are programs where you collect data for science, for conservation, and we will talk about that on Friday a little bit more in detail. But you supporting, by traveling to the Galapagos Islands, already a lot of conservation efforts. So that's from me, and I would go back to our screen. Let's see, and maybe put that away. Perfect. And then, Kate, if you want to come, or maybe all of you can come back online, Jonathan, Jean, Kate, and then maybe we start with the first questions that are coming in, and I will give the word to you, Kate.
Sure. So one of the questions that came in, it's about someone who's very interested in underwater photography, and they're wondering if there's a certain time of the year that's best for that, or a certain season when you can capture the best underwater photos.
That question I probably would also give directly to Jonathan, because he's a professional underwater photographer and he is photographing since 30 years, beautiful photos. Jonathan, do you want to take the question?
Sure, and that was a great summary of when and where to dive in the Galapagos, and with several decades diving in Galapagos, those topics come up again and again. People asking, where should we go, when should we go, and so on. And the question of photography is also one we frequently get. Can you still see me?
Yep.
Yeah, so I just had a blip in the internet. So photography, when is the best time of the year? When you can be there, basically. I would say there is no time when it's specifically better because of the marine currents, or because of the because of the visibility, or because of a particular event, or the lunar phase, and so on. There's an element of luck, as within any photography. It also depends on what kind of photography you're keen on doing. So I would split photography into two fields. One is macro and one is wide angle. Galapagos offers one of the best wide angle experiences anywhere in the world. It's not an easy place necessarily to photograph, because you occasionally have fairly strong currents. Water visibility may not be the best. So handling a camera underwater in those conditions, you have to be very familiar with your equipment. But if you're after big life, then certainly the cool season is the time to go. And then you're shooting very, very wide angle. You may even shoot, as I do sometimes, ambient light. So forget about strobes, forget about all those complications. Just take your camera down. It can even be something as small as a GoPro. I see people now with smartphones and some very sophisticated underwater housings, and they produce some incredible photographs. So you don't necessarily have to have a very, very expensive kit. But certainly wide angle during the cool season, and you can get close up to hopefully some big schools of fish, schools of sharks, hammerheads, rays, turtles. The wildlife is certainly there. So for the big life, I would say probably better during the cool season. Macro is pretty much all year round. As you know, the macro is that tiny, the tiny little animals you see. It might be corals, it might be anemones. Galapagos is not a place where you get a huge array of colorful invertebrates such as the corals. I mean, if you want to go to somewhere like Raja Ampat or Indonesia, where you get these incredible colorful reefs, that is not Galapagos, but it does have a massive diversity of invertebrate life that you can photograph if you're into the macro. And it doesn't really matter what time of the year, and it also doesn't really matter what the conditions are, because if you're photographing something which is very small, even with poor visibility, you can produce absolutely world-class quality stuff. So summarizing, for wide angle and the big life, almost certainly during the cooler season, for macro all year round.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Jean, I know that you traveled several times with us and you changed your equipment to different types of GoPros. You want to maybe add something for those who are not using the big camera, but the GoPro for videos?
Yes, I've brought 2 cameras with me to the Galapagos in my 4 trips there. And very early on, Jonathan recommended that I ditch the Sony camera that I had, which was a smaller one. It wasn't one of the really massive ones, and just go with the GoPro that I carried. And I never regretted it. I've used the GoPro 95% of the time. And with the GoPro 2, especially the newer versions, you can shoot a pretty high resolution. And if you're a little further away from the subject than you'd like to be, you can always cut it down and you'll still have a very high resolution image or video. The downside of the GoPro, in my opinion, though, is it does not take good pictures. It's awesome for video, but the pictures themselves are not that good as a general rule, or at least I haven't figured out how to be able to get a good picture out of the GoPro. But there's so much action in the Galapagos that I find myself shooting video 95% of the time anyway. So.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jean. What would be the next question?
So another question that we had come in is someone was concerned about the currents and how strong they are at different times of year. I know you did mention this in your presentation, but if you could do a recap about how, the currents change at different times of year, and maybe a little bit about the different temperatures.
Yeah, so yes, we do have currents in the Galapagos Islands. What is the reason that most of the dive liveaboards will request that you are advanced certified, as well as, I think I get a little bit of feedback. Could all of us be muted for a second? Perfect. The currents. You do have different currents, and that's the reason why dive liveaboards also request that you advanced open water, as well as have 50 to maybe even 100 dives, just to make sure that you can handle currents. Because in the upper islands, Wolf and Darwin, they are very exposed, and we can have currents. Sometimes there are no currents whatsoever, but sometimes there are very, very strong currents. And what I often say, we do not fight the currents. We're not going down and swimming the whole dive against the currents, what you have sometimes on other dive areas that people tell me. And they obviously don't want to do, exercise underwater. They want to enjoy the underwater world. And what we're doing when we have strong currents is we're doing a negative entry. So every one of us is dropping in at the same time, we're going down at the same time, and we're meeting off 10 meters. And then what we often do is we're just hanging there. So we're finding a good rock. Galapagos is volcanic, so we do have a lot of rocks where you can hold on, where you don't destroy any corals or any barnacles, etc. So we can hold on and we can watch it. And sometimes it's like a cinema. You watch the hammerheads swimming by, you see a whale shark swimming by. So even if we do have strong currents, it's not that we're fighting it the whole time. It's often that we just hold on and just enjoy the view basically around us. And that we do together as a group. So if we have strong currents, we would then move as a group. So if we don't like one spot anymore and think another spot would be better, we lifting as a group, going to the next, and then we holding on to the next rocks around us. So yes, we do have currents, but they're obviously not that you're doing swimming against them underwater. However, I always recommend do have experience. So the minimum you should have coming to the Galapagos are 50 dives. That said, I do know that not only the dive amount is relevant, how much experience you have or how happy you feel underwater. So if you're having 50 dives and you're still a little bit nervous, maybe do some more other dives in other areas that are easier before coming to the Galapagos to make sure that you can enjoy it. Because what you're having when you're coming to a liveaboard and you're so nervous about everything else, and then you can't enjoy the beauty around you. So make sure that you feel safe underwater. And when you have, 45 dives, but you do free diving and you're doing a lot of water sports and you were just very good underwater, 45 dives might be enough for you. So it depends a little bit how you feel underwater. And if you have specific questions to yourself, you can also ask me. How do they change during the year? They do change. We have obviously in the colder season much more stronger currents. However, in the hot season there can be currents as well, but the diving tends to be easier. Jonathan, do you want to add anything to that in terms of how it varies during the year?
Sure. Again, I think it's a bit of a question of luck. The lunar cycle certainly plays a role throughout the year. So apart from the warm, cold season circumstances, the lunar cycle tends to bring in stronger currents at certain periods, and that can be associated with full moon. Once again, this is not absolutely, a rule. It's a question of luck when you get there. But full moon and about 3 days afterwards, frequently you can have some fairly powerful currents. Otherwise, what we tend to do, and this is something which I think works for most people, is that even if you get very powerful currents in certain areas, a lot of the dive sites offer an alternative drop-in area. So we can often drop in areas where the currents are not strong, and this is something that we do up in Wolf and Darwin. Whereas in Darwin, occasionally you get some howling currents. You also get equally absolutely no current whatsoever at different periods. But there are different areas that you can drop in so that if the currents are particularly powerful, we can avoid diving in those areas. I do see that there's a question come up as to whether or not we can use reef hooks in Galapagos, and that is not permitted. It's unlikely that you would be doing any damage, but I think it comes down to the fact that not everybody knows how to use them responsibly. So if there were a qualification for a reef hook and you've used it before and you know how to use it, you won't damage things. But I think the National Park has decided that they're not going to be allowed within the marine reserve. But there's always a way to find diveable and safe conditions, no matter how strong the currents are.
Thank you, Jonathan. And I know that Jean wanted to add something to the current situation as well.
Yeah, the additional comment I would make is you guys, the organizers, Galapagos Whale Shark Project, Jenny, Jonathan, everybody, have structured the diving days such that the first couple of days, there's a lot of intentional effort made at getting you comfortable in the water. The checkout dive, of course, is all about getting your weights set right and getting your first exposure. But then the second day is done in the same fashion. And to that point, we on the first couple of days, you typically don't do a negative entry. You do a standard positive entry, and you're on the surface because the currents aren't as strong there. And you go down and you work your way into a negative entry so that by the time you get to Darwin on the third day, when you're on the 1 week trip, by the time you get there, you're very comfortable and you've done a negative entry and you're ready for the area, Darwin, Wolf, where you're going to more likely run into the stronger currents. And finally, as a diver, of course, I love currents in general, but I didn't really find the currents that strong except in a couple of places. And as Jonathan pointed out, those can be avoided. And I can't think of many situations, just a couple where we worked a little bit against the current. For the most part, the dives are planned to work with the currents, not against them.
Thank you very much. Which questions else do we have, Kate?
I think that's all we have. If anyone else is with us right now and wants to send us any other questions, feel free to do so now.
I think I had one that came up several times in emails that I was writing. So people were asking within the dive time, June to October, which months should I choose? And as Jonathan already mentioned, it always depends a little bit on the luck. The reason why we chose, for example, to do our trips in July and August is that I felt when we did trips in September, the water was just a little bit colder, the trade winds were more, and I'm a wimp when it comes to cold water, so I prefer it a little bit warmer, but I do want to see the big stuff. So that was the main reason why I chose to do our trips in July and August, because the tendency is that the waters are a little bit warmer than they are in September. However, the conditions vary from week to week, from sometimes day to day. And people don't believe me that sometimes, but when they're coming to Galapagos, and especially on our 15-day trip, when we're spending a lot of days after each other on one place, they suddenly say, well, you are right. And one time we're jumping in Darwin, there's nothing, there's not a lot of sharks to see. There's not the visibility, not so good. And people are saying, okay, why is it your favorite spot? And then the next time we're jumping in, it's just vibrant, the sharks are everywhere. It's so much life there. And then they say, oh, now I understand. And now then they understand why it can change so much, because it's not only the season, it's also all the influences that are coming together in the Galapagos. So there's not a perfect month, but the reason why we chose July and August is just the tendency is that it's sometimes a little bit warmer. When there's no more question, we also could, otherwise, if Jean or Jonathan, you have anything to add about the best time for the Galapagos dive?
Yeah, I think no matter when you go, you're not going to be disappointed. I think that's the bottom line. It doesn't matter whether it's warm season, cool season, in between the two. Galapagos offers, as Jenny pointed out, a biodiversity which is unique. Nowhere on the planet can you have the experience that you're going to get in Galapagos. You can see the tropical wildlife, you can see the big life, you can see the small invertebrates, you can see penguins that you associated with more polar waters and everything. So there's never a bad time, and Galapagos never disappoints. I've been fortunate enough that I've dived in many areas around the world, and without a shadow of a doubt, you can't beat Galapagos. There may be a specific area where you can see one thing or one set of wildlife or something, but Galapagos pretty much has it all. So I know I might be a little bit biased, but if you haven't gone to Galapagos yet and you're a diver, I would fully and strongly recommend you do so.
Thank you very much. Anyone else would?
Yeah, I would totally agree with Jonathan. Once I went to Galapagos, it is by far the most spectacular diving that I've ever done or probably will ever do. And I'm coming off a trip with Galapagos Whale Shark Project to Raja Ampat, and that was a really fantastic trip, but it still ranks number 2 compared to the Galapagos. And I've been there 4 times now, 4 years in a row. And mostly those trips have been in the first 2 weeks of September, and last year's trip was in August. And every single one of them was outstanding for different reasons. Every single trip was different. I did one 15-day trip and 3 7-day trips. But every trip was different in terms of the highlights. We saw whale sharks every year, but it really didn't matter what time of the year I chose to go in August, September, or in the June through October period because I wanted to be sure to see whale sharks, and that's what I will continue to do, in spite of the cold water. I'm like Jenny. I get cold pretty easily and have to add extra layers on top of a 7 mil suit. But I will always go in that July, August, and September if they ever offered again time frame, because that's when I have the greatest chance of seeing the whale sharks. However, the other creatures that you can see are amazing, and it changes from year to year, just like the climate changes year to year and week to week and day to day. And you just never know what you're going to run into.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Were there any more questions, Kate, that came in? Otherwise,
I think someone had asked, I think when Jonathan was speaking, I think maybe the comment was about when Jonathan was discussing how the Galapagos has like the most biodiversity. He said, even not at Socorro or Cocos. So Jonathan,
yes.
I don't know if you want to, or Jenny.
Yeah, no, I think I give it to Jonathan, but yeah, it's.
Yeah, I mean, I would say yes, even not Socorro and Cocos. They have a plethora of wildlife. They have good big life. They have hammerheads, occasional whale sharks, rays, particularly Socorro with manta rays and so on. But they don't have the sheer gamma, the range of diversity that we have in the Galapagos Islands. So you might go to Socorro and maybe see a bigger school of hammerheads, although you can see as big in Galapagos, but you simply don't have the diversity. So in that way, Galapagos is number one, unbeatable, even better than Socorro and Galapagos.
Thank you very much. I think with that, we answered all the comments and questions that were there. If you have obviously a question that just comes up tonight when you're laying in bed and 3 o'clock in the morning, you wake up and you have another questions, our email address is info@galapagossharkdiving.com. Just write us and we will get back to you and to try to answer your questions with that. The upcoming seminars have different topics, all related to Lake Galapagos. Tomorrow we will talk a little bit more specific about each dive site that we're doing in the liverboards or having in the Galapagos Islands, so join us for that. We will have citizen science that we do on board, different programs that you as a diver can participate to collect data for science on Friday, as well as on Saturday we have preparation, so what to think about when you're getting ready for your dive liverboard in the Galapagos. And on Sunday, Jonathan will give you a little bit of an update what we are doing on our research side. So now we're talking obviously about all the diving that we're doing, but obviously we're also doing work in the Galapagos Islands. We're researching whale sharks, and what is coming on news we will discover on Sunday. So join us for that. I thank you very much. We thank you for joining us and giving us all the questions and a beautiful time together. Thank you very much and a good day. Bye-bye.